I never thought the day would come so fast. My daughter Lila, all grown and glowing, standing in a bridal shop in downtown Atlanta, trying on a gown that looked like it had been made for a queen. Her smile was radiant, but my heart clenched. I had seen the signs, the small things she brushed off, the way he looked at her sometimes, the way he spoke when he thought no one was listening. I tried to warn her, but she waved me off, laughing. "Mom, relax. He's perfect for me," she said, spinning slowly, the lace brushing against her calves. Perfect. That word hit me like ice. I knew better. I had raised her to see beyond charm, beyond fancy dinners and sweet words. I tried to speak softly, gently, planting seeds of caution. I told her about respect, about patience, about red flags that weren't always obvious. But she was determined, and I could see it in her eyes. She had already decided. That night, after the fitting, I sat in the kitchen alone, the smell of chamomile tea filling the air. I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, "Just be careful, Leela. Please be careful." I didn't know then how fast my warning would turn into a desperate call in the dead of night. The wedding was flawless. Sunlight streamed through the chapel windows, catching the sparkle in Lila's hair and the polished shoes of her husband Daniel. Everyone smiled, laughed, cheered, but I watched quietly, noticing the subtle tensions only a mother could see. Daniel held her hand, yes, but his grip was tight, almost possessive. Leela laughed at his jokes, but I could see the flicker of something uncomfortable in her eyes whenever he leaned too close or whispered in that low, smooth voice. After the reception, as the last guest trickled out and the ballroom emptied, I hugged her tightly. "Remember, baby, listen to your heart. Always." She nodded, a little impatient, and ran off to join Daniel. The first month of marriage went by like a whirlwind. I tried to stay out of their business, calling sparingly, letting them settle in. But then the calls started. At first, small things, hesitations, changes in tone, but the fear in her voice was unmistakable. I remember the night I got the call. My phone rang and I saw her name. The moment I answered, I knew something had shifted. Her voice, usually confident, was trembling. "Mom, help me," she whispered. Those 2 words tore through me like a knife. My heart raced. I gripped the kitchen counter to keep from falling. She didn't explain. She just said it again, softer this time, almost like a plea for survival. "Mom, help me." And I knew then my warnings had come too late. But I wasn't going to wait another second to act. I drove through the night, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every red light felt like a lifetime, every honk a warning. I kept replaying our last conversation in my head, how she had laughed at my concerns, how I had begged her to notice the cracks before it was too late. When I arrived at their townhouse, the lights were off, the street eerily quiet. My heart thudded as I climbed the stairs, each step echoing like a drumbeat. I knocked softly at first, calling her name. Silence. My worry surged into panic. I tried the door, unlocked. That was the first real warning. Inside, the air was thick, heavy, scented faintly with expensive cologne that wasn't hers. Leela sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide and haunted. She flinched when I approached, and I immediately crouched in front of her. "It's okay, baby, I'm here," I whispered, voice low but steady. She shook her head. "Mom, I didn't see it. I thought he loved me. I thought I was imagining things." Her voice cracked. He's not who I thought he was." The anger I'd kept bottled up for weeks finally surged. I wanted to storm in and tear him apart, but I held back, holding her instead. My daughter was terrified, trapped in a life that had seemed perfect, but was anything but. And in that moment, I knew exactly what had to happen next. I stayed with Lila that night, sitting on the couch beside her as she recounted everything. The late nights when he vanished without explanation, the sudden bursts of anger over small things, the way he criticized her choices under the guise of helping her improve. Her voice wavered, breaking under the weight of all the fear she had been holding back. She told me about the first week when he had isolated her from her friends, insisting that only they mattered now. how he laughed when she asked to see her family, turning her love for them into guilt. She described moments that made my stomach twist, little details that seemed harmless to an outsider, but painted a picture of manipulation, control, and danger. I listened, letting her pour it all out. My mind raced, connecting every tiny sign I had noticed before the wedding. The way he subtly questioned her choices, how he always had to be the center of attention, the way his charm evaporated the second he felt challenged. All the pieces fit, and the puzzle was ugly. I held her hand tightly. "Baby, you're not alone. We're going to fix this. We're going to get you safe." Her tears soaked my sleeve, and I felt a burning fury I could barely contain. This man had taken what should have been one of the happiest times of her life and turned it into a nightmare. I made a plan right then. We would gather evidence, document everything, and make sure the authorities understood the danger he posed. But first, we needed a safe place, my home, somewhere he couldn't touch her. Lila hesitated, afraid he might find her, but I insisted, packing a small bag with the essentials while keeping my voice calm. The drive back was tense. Every streetlight made her jump. Every passing car made her flinch. I held her hand through it all, whispering reminders that she was safe now, that no matter what, I was here, and she would not face this alone. Once we arrived, I locked the doors, drew the curtains, and made sure the alarms were set. Lila sat on my bed, hugging a pillow, and I sat beside her. I promised her that the next step would be the most crucial, confronting him legally, cutting him out completely, and reclaiming her life. As I watched her finally relax just a little, I realized something crucial. This was no longer just about protection. It was about empowerment. My daughter had been scared into silence, but now, with me by her side, she was going to rise, and together, we would ensure that he would never touch her again. The next morning, I called a lawyer I trusted, someone who had handled delicate cases before, someone who understood when a client's safety was at risk. Leela sat beside me, nervous but alert, absorbing every word. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her shirt, but also the flicker of determination beginning to replace fear. We started by documenting everything: messages, emails, late-night calls, strange purchases, unexplained withdrawals. Lila read aloud each entry, her voice steadying as the patterns became undeniable. He had tried to gaslight her, to make her doubt herself, but the proof was now concrete. The lawyer laid out the options: restraining orders, emergency protective measures, documentation for potential divorce proceedings. Each step sounded intimidating, but I emphasized one truth: Lila had rights, and she had power. She wasn't trapped anymore. When we were ready to take the first action, I drove her to the courthouse. She clutched my hand tightly as we walked inside, and I whispered reminders. "You are strong. You deserve peace. You deserve happiness." I could see her inhale deeply, taking in the scent of polished wood and the faint aroma of coffee from the lobby, grounding herself. Filing for the protective order was more nerve-wracking than anything else. The courtroom smelled faintly of old books and dust, echoing with footsteps and murmured conversations. Lila trembled as she signed the paperwork, but she did it. Every signature, every initial was a declaration. She would no longer be silenced. She would no longer be afraid. Afterward, we walked outside into the crisp air, and I felt her shoulders loosen. She looked at me, eyes bright but wet with tears. "Ma, I couldn't have done this without you." I hugged her, holding her tight, letting her know that her courage was enough to change her future. But as I drove her home, I knew this was only the beginning. The fight wasn't over. Daniel would push back, and the shadows of fear still lingered. We would need strategy, patience, and unwavering strength, and I was ready to guide her through every step. The day of confrontation arrived sooner than I expected. Daniel had been sending veiled threats, his messages alternating between fake apologies and thinly veiled intimidation. I told Lila to stay calm, to remain composed, and most importantly, to never meet him alone. We had lawyers, witnesses, and cameras. Every precaution was taken. When he finally appeared at the lawyer's office, He looked the same charming man everyone had seen at the wedding. But his mask cracked the moment he saw us together. Lila standing tall, not trembling, and me beside her, calm but unyielding. There was a flicker of shock, quickly replaced by anger in his eyes. "Lila, we can work this out," he said, his voice oily and persuasive. She shook her head, her voice firm. "No, you lied, manipulated, and tried to control me. I trusted you, and you destroyed that trust. This ends now." I watched as he faltered, realizing that his attempts at intimidation wouldn't work. Every lie he had whispered, every subtle control tactic he had used, had been documented. Our lawyer presented the evidence. Each text, message, and financial manipulation laid bare. Daniel tried to interject, tried to charm, but it was useless. The proof was undeniable. I felt a surge of pride as I watched my daughter speak for herself, her eyes steady, her voice strong. She had reclaimed her power, and nothing he could do would take that away. I could almost hear the echo of my warnings from months ago, finally vindicated. By the end of the day, the protective order was approved. Lila was safe, legally shielded from him. But beyond the legal victory, something more profound had happened. She had confronted fear itself, stared it down, and walked away, standing tall. As we left the courthouse, I could see her shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. She breathed in the crisp air, tasted the freedom she had fought to claim, and smiled at me. "Mom, I feel like myself again." That night at home, she unpacked her things, reclaimed her space, and laughed softly at small, ordinary things, the way the curtains swayed in the evening breeze, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint scent of my lavender candles. It was ordinary, yes, but after weeks of fear and manipulation, ordinary felt like a miracle. And in that ordinary, I saw the extraordinary strength of my daughter. She had survived his control, his lies, his charm, and she had emerged not broken, but empowered. The days after the confrontation were surreal. Lila moved through our house with a cautious but growing confidence, reacquainting herself with the life that had been overshadowed by fear. The little things became victories, making her own meals, laughing at a joke she wanted to share, even answering her phone without flinching. Every ordinary action was a statement. She was no longer his prisoner. I watched her reconnect with friends she had stopped seeing, her smile genuine for the first time in weeks. Coffee dates, casual walks in the park, and quiet dinners became moments of reclaiming herself. She told stories freely again, her voice carrying the warmth and humor I remembered from her childhood. It was like watching a wilted flower bloom under the sun, vibrant and unapologetic. We talked long into the nights, sharing memories, hopes, and fears. Layla admitted how trapped she had felt, how easy it was for someone manipulative to twist her perception, and how grateful she was for my warnings, even though she hadn't listened at first. I told her that recognizing the danger and choosing to act was a mark of strength, not failure. One evening, she stood at the window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood. "Mom," she said softly, "I think I'm finally ready to move on, to live my life fully, without fear." I put my hand on her shoulder, feeling the weight of her words and the resilience behind them. "You already are, baby," I said. "You fought for this freedom. Don't ever let anyone take it from you again." There was no sudden celebration, no grand gestures, just quiet moments of healing, laughter returning to her voice, and the slow rebuilding of trust in herself. She started volunteering at a local community center, mentoring young women, warning them of the subtle manipulations that often go unnoticed. She turned her pain into purpose, and I watched with pride as the woman who had once called me in desperation became a beacon of strength and hope for others. And through it all, she never let go of the lessons we had lived through together, the importance of intuition, courage, and self-worth. She carried them quietly, confidently, like armor that could never be pierced again. Months passed and the shadow of Daniel faded from Lila's life. Court dates were over, legal battles resolved, and his attempts to manipulate or contact her ceased entirely. She had transformed the fear that once held her captive into a quiet, unshakable strength. One sunny afternoon, we sat together on the porch, iced tea in hand, listening to the soft hum of the neighborhood. Birds chirped, children's laughter echoed in the distance, and the world felt ordinary. But for Lila, ordinary was everything. She smiled, turning to me, eyes bright and clear. "Mom, I never imagined feeling this free," she said, letting out a soft, genuine laugh. "It's like I've been holding my breath all my life, and now I can finally exhale." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You did this, baby. You faced fear, stood up for yourself, and reclaimed your life. Nothing can take that from you." She nodded, leaning back in her chair, basking in the sunlight. Her laughter came easily now, mingling with the warmth of the afternoon. She was rebuilding her life on her terms, volunteering, reconnecting with friends, pursuing new passions, even traveling. Every choice she made was hers alone, unshadowed by someone else's control. That night, as we sat inside with soft jazz playing in the background, Lila turned to me, her expression tender. "Thank you for believing in me, Mom, for warning me, for standing by me. I know it wasn't easy to watch me walk into danger." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You were always strong, Lila. I just reminded you of it. And now, look at you, stronger than ever." She hugged me tightly, and in that embrace, I felt the culmination of months of fear, anxiety, and struggle transform into relief, love, and triumph. My daughter had survived the storm, and she had emerged not just whole, but radiant, her voice clear, her choices her own, her spirit unbreakable. As I watched her later, laughing at a silly show on TV, I realized that my warning had been just the beginning. What mattered was that she had listened to herself in the end, and that courage would carry her for the rest of her life. She had called me for help, and together we had turned desperation into victory. And in the quiet of that evening, I finally allowed myself to breathe, knowing my daughter was free, safe, and unstoppable.